Hey everyone, welcome back to When Creatives Thrive, a BOPA podcast. I'm Stuart Rustin, the multimedia manager at BOPA, and this episode we're joined by Sheila Crider, a self-taught artist who recently relocated to Baltimore after facing displacement from her home in Washington, D.C. We'll discuss her relocation, establishing a creative community for herself in Baltimore, and how the city and its skyline found its way into her most recent work. Sheila and I also discuss her coining of the term Blackstraction in the art lexicon, and professional advice for artists young and old. Sheila, welcome.
Hey, Stuart.
How's it going?
It's going just great. Thanks. A little cold, but otherwise I'm thriving.
Good. That's great to hear. Well, listen, I know that recently you relocated here from D.C., and we'd met previously when you were a part of the Emerge exhibit at the Broma Seltzer Arts Tower. So I have a little bit of a background and an understanding of where you come from, but I think it's important to share it because I think there's a lot worth taking from that story. So can you walk me through how you ended up here in Baltimore?
Okay. It's actually kind of hard to believe I've been here for 2 years. You know, it seems like it was just yesterday that I was told that my house was going to go onto the market, and I couldn't afford a $500,000 house, so there was no way that I could buy it. So I started looking at alternatives, and Baltimore was an alternative because the housing here is not as expensive as it is in Washington. Now, while my dream house is still out there, right now I'm still renting and looking for where I'd like to actually end up being in Baltimore, but one of the things that's interesting about making a move from Washington to Baltimore, as an older artist, it was interesting because I looked at Baltimore as a viable option because I've had a career and Washington is only an hour away. And I thought that it would be beneficial to me to maintain my contacts in Washington at the same time that I built my empire here, you know, and it's worked to my advantage. I mean, I knew people here. I worked with a New Door Creative Gallery for a number of years so that I had a relationship with a gallerist here. And I also, early in my career, had worked with artists here. I had a relationship with Jeffrey Kent when he had Sub-Basement Studios, and I actually did a performance there back in the day when I coined the term Blackstraction. And all of those things came into play, you know, when I was thinking about moving here. And, you know, just the fact that Baltimore itself seemed like such an open, welcoming art scene. I mean, you read about it a lot in the paper, I mean, and there's Be More Art and things like that. So there's so much going on. There's BOPA, you know, Artscape. Those things, you know, make the scene here very visible. And, of course, there's the BMA. You know, I would come over from D.C. to go to the BMA specifically because they have really, really great shows.
Can you tell us how your experience of Baltimore has influenced your work as an abstract artist?
Well, it's interesting because I came over from Washington with a lot of stuff, you know, that was kind of half-finished or unsuccessful. And one of the things I wanted to do was to resolve a lot of that work because I'm a strong believer in recycling and I don't like waste. So that's where I started working, was with these things that I brought over, so that being in Baltimore gave me fresh eyes. And then the environment of Baltimore itself is so different from Washington in terms of the buildings and the structure, the tightness of the streets here, and how you're always surrounded by buildings. And I found myself just kind of overwhelmed in a way by the architectural experience that I was having. You know, and it came out of my work in a series of cityscapes. You know, I found that I was inspired by the arches and the windows and the building materials. Just that for me as an abstractionist, I found that that was food for thought, and that I wanted to incorporate a lot of that feeling into the way that I was working. And I think that that's what being in downtown Baltimore did for me.
I always think it's interesting when I think about your work that you are so drawn toward the buildings and the ways that the shapes work together and play off of each other. I think one of the words you used when we chatted during some of the Emerge promotional material was like a synchronicity that happens. But meanwhile, I feel like most people spend their day walking down the street with their head in their phones. How do you continue to stay engaged with the environment around you? Or does it still excite you?
Yes. I mean, I lived in the same house for 30 years, and I could look out my kitchen window and see something different every day. And I mean, I think that as an artist, you look that way, because nothing is ever the same. So it's integral to look and to see what you're looking at, and I think that I'm always subconsciously composing, working on composition, I'm editing, but I spent like 6 months without a studio, but I was working the whole time, if you understand what I mean, because I'm just thinking about where I want to go.
So when we met initially in fall of 2024, you were preparing for the Emerge exhibit. Can you go a little bit deeper into that experience?
Mm-hmm. I was actually very pleased the first summer I was here in the summer of 23 to be juried into B23, which was another BOPA venture with Artscape. It was an exhibition that featured Baltimore artists, so I was very happy that I had a work selected for that show because it was a way to introduce myself to Baltimore, to identify as a Baltimore artist. So from that experience, the curator here, Kirk Shannon Butts, saw my work and he arranged a studio visit. And he came, he liked what he saw, and he offered me the spot in Emerge. And I was very pleased by that because, again, it was a way to introduce my work to Baltimore in a professional setting through a professional group that would allow me to kind of set a foundation for the work I want to do here. So it was kind of interesting. I thought I would show different kinds of work, but as I ended up having to leave Lamondo's studio in July, I didn't really have a lot of time to work out new work. So I had to improvise. And I think it worked out pretty well because I was able to show the cityscape paintings, the drawings of Baltimore itself, and I showed a series of abstract work which were kind of built on the idea of cityscapes that were just completely abstract, but that had the same kind of architectural structure that was in the drawing. So it was very interesting for me, and it was interesting to have the show at the Bromo Tower and to have the little rooms, because it allowed the work to speak for itself and to interact with itself in a way that I think that people could appreciate it for what it was.
Can you describe the work?
Yeah, the Cane pieces are an interpretation of a poem that was written for me to interpret. It is came, semicolon. It is in us, we am of it too. And it was a poem that referenced community, friendship, how we become who we are, and which I thought was important too, just in terms of the fact that I relocated, and I'm still trying to figure out who I am at this advanced age. It's like we're always trying to figure that out, but at the same time, it relied on the cityscapes. Came Baltimore, it's very interesting exercise. They were black and white drawings. And my goal in those drawings was to give you the feeling that you were actually walking through town. So that I wanted to create a rhythm with using line and color and shape that would drive you from one piece to the next. So I think that the way that they were installed, you were able to get that experience.
Can we bounce back to, I would love to talk a bit more about Blackstraction, and I don't want that to get lost.
Early in my career, one of the things that I did, which was also a no-no back in the day, is I sold drawings at the Eastern Market in Washington, D.C. Every Sunday I was there with my little stand selling drawings, and self-promotion not allowed. But at the same time, people would always ask me, what do you call this? Because they didn't think they had actually seen what I do before. And so I had a show at Parish Gallery in Georgetown, which was an important Black gallery back in the 90s. And I decided one day, I'm going to call it Blackstraction, because I was strongly influenced by people like Sam Gilliam and Howardina Pindell, who were doing research around abstract painting. And so I just called it Blackstraction like that, and I called it the objectification of abstract painting because it involved a three-dimensional element. Okay, Sam's straight paintings and Howardina's subtle relief with the punch-outs and things like that. And what was interesting is that after I coined the term, I started researching. I mean, I was always a researcher about language, but I started looking into the ways that people worked in the studio, and I found that Blackstraction is actually a term that could be applied to this way of working historically. And if you go to my blog back in 2020, which was actually the 20-year anniversary of the term being coined, I did a series of lectures where I talk about the historic foundation of Blackstraction and how you can trace it through the canon of abstract work. It's very interesting because at the same time that Blackstraction was being created, in quotes, you have things like minimalism that are coming along. And what's interesting, too, is you have Jack Whitten, who talks about the fact that the work that Black artists were doing at the time in the 60s and the 70s, no matter how important it was ignored by the reviewers, because the work was not important. It's like, everybody knows that the only people doing important work were white men. I mean, even people like Anne Truitt, Agnes Martin, these women who were very important in the beginning of minimalism were ignored by these same critics. And all of these people have made important contributions and pushed the idea of abstraction and how we work forward. I'm working really hard to make sure that Blackstraction becomes a term in the fine art lexicon because it I think, identifies and elevates the work of people like Sam Gilliam to a point that they become the kind of household name that Frank Stella is.
So you mentioned earlier you made a move to Baltimore as an older artist. And I'm wondering, what advice would you give to someone of an older age who wants to participate in the arts or is exploring arts as a profession?
Well, it's advice for young artists and older artists because the most important thing is to make your work, okay? Your work is one thing, but the administration of an art business is something totally different. And if you have not been an art business all your career, then it's going to be very difficult to make a transition late in your life to a different place if you don't have a foundation. And the most important thing any artist can do is to not think that being an artist is a magical thing, because it's not. It's a lot of hard work. And it's the hard work that involves finding opportunities, responding to opportunities, getting professional slides taken of your work, professional images. It's very important that you are a professional in a way that administrates your career that will advance your career. Because you could turn around on the same coin all your life waiting for somebody to discover you. And that's a very frustrating thing. And what's interesting now is that it's okay to be self-promotional. Okay, early in my career, it was a no-no. You could not do that. But now It's how people introduce themselves and how they gain a career.
Yeah, it's really part of the business as a whole. I mean, you've got to wear many hats.
Exactly. You have to wear many hats, and you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for these opportunities that come your way. You just can't think you make your work and that's the end of it. You're going to need the images. You're going to need a statement. You're going to need a professional resume. You're going to need a lot of things. You're going to need to have that work framed, maybe. So, there are all sorts of things that people don't think about.
But do you think it's possible if somebody gets a start later on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just because self-promotion is fine, and with things like Instagram and TikTok and, all the social media, if you're not self-promoting, then you're kind of behind the times now.
Definitely.
Branding, I think, is what they like to call it. We're in an age of advanced consumerism, okay? And branding is part of all of that. Because, why does John next door need to have a brand?
It seems like people make the assumption that you're really only relevant unless you have a brand. You're only sort of put together. You're only kind of worth considering unless you have all the bells and whistles.
But, what's funny about that, Stuart, is that it's actually, as an artist, a very true thing. Though it's not valued as much now as it used to be, because having an original, unique voice as an artist used to be very important. Now you need to be working on the right subject matter, I think, or you're talking about that subject matter in a way that allows it to be exploited in the art world in a way that is interesting and financially solvent.
Can you give any examples?
We could talk about the hip-hop exhibit that was at the BMA.
Okay.
And one of the very important small things was in one of the wall labels where the question was posed, is it the art or the artist, the product?
Sheila, it's been awesome talking. I always enjoy our conversations. You're always thinking about things in a grander
abstract way
that I personally appreciate. So thank you for being here on the podcast. Tell us what you've got coming up. Tell us where we can find you online, all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm actually very excited about what I have coming up. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I took some work to the Sandy Spring Museum because I have work in a group show coming up. Opens on the 15th of January. With a reception on the 2nd of February, and we actually have a catalog.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is with Black Artists of D.C. In May, I have an exhibition, a solo show coming up at Hillier in Washington. I told you I'm trying to keep my ties open. So I have these two important shows coming up. You can find me online, Sheila Crider, artist on Instagram. And you can check my blog. It's Out the Cube, OUTTHECUBE.blogspot.com.
Well, thank you so much. Again, it's always a pleasure, and it's great to connect with you.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks again to Sheila, and thank you for listening. If you're a creative person with a story to share, reach out to me at srustin@promotioninarts.org to be featured on the podcast. And remember, when creatives thrive, we all rise.